The swamp where Amaka lived did not feel like part of the city at all. Lagos, in all its glitter, lay only a few kilometers away, with its huge billboards, polished gates, and endless traffic of sleek cars that gleamed like black beetles under the sun. But here, in the swamp, the world was a different planet. Wooden shacks leaned against each other like tired shoulders. Roofs of rusted zinc groaned whenever the wind blew. The air tasted of damp mud and stagnant water, heavy with the faint stench of garbage drifting from the nearby dumps. It was not a place, really. It was a wound that people had been forced to live inside. Amaka, barely 12, knew every inch of that swamp. She knew where the water rose highest after rain, which planks across the muddy pools were secure enough to step on, and which paths would suck your feet into darkness if you pressed them wrong. Home was a single-room shack that she shared with her mother, Mama Amaka. Home, however, was a generous word. It was a skeleton of wood patched with plywood and faded sacks. Whenever it rained, water poured through as if the sky itself laughed at their misery. Nights were the hardest. On their thin raffia mat, she and her mother curled close, not for comfort, but for the warmth of shared shivers. Their clothes often stuck to their wet skin like second tears. And then there were the rats, the small kings of the swamp. Their eyes glowed red at night, scuttling across corners as if mocking the humans who had dropped lower than them on the ladder of comfort. Most people in Amaka's age bracket carried school bags and sharpened pencils. She carried a sack, rough, and almost heavier than her shoulders could bear. Poverty had already stolen her childhood, but the deepest cut was not poverty. It was abandonment. Her father, the shadowy man she had never truly known, had traveled abroad, her mother said, when Amaka was only 2. Since then, silence. No letters, no money, no word of life or death. To Amaka, her father existed only in imagined fragments. A man who, in her childish dreams, carried toys, held her hand on a walk to school, or bent down with laughter as he fed her candy. Each morning she woke. Those dreams popped like fragile bubbles. Reality was sharper, harsher. She simply had no father. Her mother carried that pain too. Often in the quiet hours of night, Amaka would see Mama Amaka sitting outside under the broken sky, staring as though the stars might return her missing husband. She whispered sometimes. Her voice cracked with fatigue. "Maybe he is dead. Maybe I am a widow without knowing." Those words haunted Amaka more than rats or hunger. Even as she longed for her absent father, the sight of her mother's sorrow weighed more brutally on her. Yet, despite everything, Amaka loved school. School was her castle of hope, no matter how its chalk-dusted windows rattled. She liked the way her teacher pressed his chalk against the blackboard, as if carving truth into stone. She liked reciting, raising her hand when she thought she knew the answer, and imagining herself someday not as a swamp child bent over garbage, but as a woman dressed in fine clothes, standing as a lawyer before judges, defending the weak. Each time she told her mother of that dream, Mama Amaka smiled tiredly and murmured, "My daughter, even in the mud, diamonds are hidden." But life in the swamp gave no room for dreams. Every morning, Mama Amaka left with other women, carrying sacks on their backs, heading toward the dump site. Poverty in that place did not allow mourning. Survival demanded its daily tax. Then came the sharp day that shifted everything. While scavenging among heaps of metal and glass, Mama Amaka stepped on a hidden rusty nail. She winced, pulled it out, and thought it just another wound. They all had wounds. But within days, her foot swelled, red and angry as though fire had set roots inside her flesh. The swelling climbed. Pain rooted itself like a second heart. She tried walking, she tried enduring, but within a week, she could hardly step at all. Medicine? That was an impossible word. Doctors were for the wealthy with TV screens in their air-conditioned homes. In the swamp, medicine was a luxury as unreachable as an airplane in the clouds. Mama Amaka lay on the mat, groaning, with sweat dripping while fever consumed her. And Amaka, her little girl, begged at her side, tears dripping into her mother's hand. "Mama, don't worry. I'll do the work now. I'll bring money." "You'll see." And so childhood ended. Amaka put her books aside, tied a sack over her back, and became an adult overnight. She wandered to the dumps each day, her hands searching among broken bottles and rotting food. The smell was a living beast. It stuck to her clothes, clung to her hair, clutched her throat until breathing itself became pain. She sold whatever scraps she could, walking barefoot over stones sharp enough to bite. The sun darkened her back, hunger caved her stomach inward, and her body bent. But she did not stop. Each night her mother whispered in faint voice, "I am proud of you, my daughter." And for Amaka, those words lit fires stronger than bread could. One particular night, weighed nearly double by a half-filled sack on her shoulder, she staggered her way back home. The swamp was swallowed in an eerie silence. The moon was thin, weak behind gray clouds. A faint wind howled through the zinc roof sheets, rattling them like restless ghosts. Amaka was humming, a lullaby she remembered from when she was younger, one her mother used to sing before sickness drained her strength. Singing helped her forget her burning hunger, at least for a few minutes. Her bare feet slapped the mud rhythmically, her voice a faint defiance against the oppression of her world. Then she froze. A sound pierced the night. At first, she thought it a cat wailing, or some bird calling from the distance, but no. This was sharper, fragile, desperate, the wavering cry of something helpless. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Again it came. A baby's cry, thin, weak, trembling. Amaka dropped her heavy sack. Fear and curiosity tangled inside her as she tiptoed toward the dump's edge. Rats scattered in droves. The stench assaulted her nose until her stomach lurched. Then she saw it, a bundle on the ground, wrapped in a torn, filthy blanket. Her hands trembled as she knelt. Slowly, she peeled the cloth aside, and her breath caught. A baby lay inside, lashes wet, lips pale, body shivering with cold. Its weak fists moved feebly, as though fighting the darkness. "Oh my God!" Amaka gasped, her voice breaking. "Who could do this?" She looked around desperately. Shadows stretched far, hollow and silent. No footsteps, no figure rushing to reclaim. The infant. Whoever abandoned this child had done so not by mistake. This was deliberate. Her mind screamed doubts. She was only 12. No food, no money, a sick mother waiting at home. What if she could not care for the child? What if it died in her arms? But just then, the baby whimpered again, a cry softer, weaker, as though her tiny breath might vanish at any moment. Amaka's tears spilled hot on her cheeks. She shook her head violently. "No, no, I can't leave you. I won't." With trembling courage, she wrapped the baby against her chest. The little body was frighteningly light. And then she noticed the shimmer. Around the baby's neck hung a delicate golden necklace, unexpected and out of place in this valley of rot. The chain glistened faintly in the moonlight as though whispering of mysteries greater than she could imagine. But Amaka had no time to wonder. She pulled off her thin scarf and wrapped it around the baby, holding the child tight against her own bony chest. As she stumbled back toward the swamp, each step unfamiliar and heavy, something changed inside her. Until now, she had worked for scraps, dragging hope like a crippled shadow. But tonight, beneath the starless sky, her arms cradled more than trash. She held a fragile purpose, a life entrusted by fate into her care. And though she did not know it then, Carrying that golden-necked child marked the moment her world tilted from despair toward destiny. The first night after that terrifying discovery, Amaka did not sleep. She sat on the damp mat in their shack, cradling the fragile baby against her chest. The air inside was heavy with the musk of mud, smoke, and sickness. Every so often, Mama Amaka coughed weakly from where she lay, her swollen legs stretched out, wrapped in old cloth that smelled faintly of pus. But Amaka could barely attend to her mother now. Her arms were stiff from holding the tiny stranger who had been thrust into her life like a test from heaven itself. The baby's cries were not like anything she had ever heard. They were sharp, wails that pierced through the zinc walls, slicing the night with their urgency, each one cutting Amaka's heart open deeper. She tried rocking the child, patting her tiny back, whispering clumsy lullabies, but the cries rolled on like waves. Striking an already sinking boat, panic bubbled inside her. With tears in her eyes, she turned desperately toward her mother. "Mama, help me." "She won't stop crying." "What do I do?" Mama Amaka stirred, coughing, struggling to sit. Her body looked as though it carried 50 years more than its real age. She leaned forward and touched the child's lips with trembling fingers. A sigh escaped her. "She is hungry," she rasped. "She needs milk." Milk. The word was heavier than any stone Amaka had ever carried. Milk belonged to the privileged. For the swamp dwellers, it was a dream, an unreachable miracle. They barely found enough to buy a handful of gari, some weeks flavored with dirtier water than most dogs drank. Milk existed in billboards. In supermarkets, Amaka only saw from a distance as she picked scraps near the city. Her heart sank with dread. For a split second, she even considered taking the child back, returning her to the dump, to fate, to whatever dark hands had abandoned her there. But when she looked into the baby's pale, quivering face, that thought vanished like flame thrown into water. She pressed the child tighter against her chest. "No, I won't. You're mine now." That next morning, desperation pushed her out of the shack. She knocked door to door, the baby clutched in her arms, begging, "Please, help us. I just need milk. She's starving." Most neighbors turned their faces away with irritation. In the slum, sympathy was as scarce as medicine. A woman carrying a basin of laundry sneered. "Amaka, you cannot even feed yourself. Now you've picked another burden? Does poverty not weigh you enough? Return that child before she becomes your grave." Others whispered cruelly behind her back. "Maybe it's her own baby," some accused. "You know how these ones start early. She's already ruined herself." Each word struck like arrows, but Amaka clutched the infant tighter, shielding her from a world that already rejected her. Then, mercy finally knocked in the face of one kind soul, Mama Kosi, a gray-haired neighbor with tired eyes, but a heart still warm. When she heard the child's cries, she disappeared into her shack and returned with a small bowl of pap thickened with milk powder. She sighed and pressed it into Amaka's hands. "It won't last more than tonight," Mama Kosi said, "but give this to her. At least she will stop crying for some hours." Amaka's eyes blurred with gratitude. "Thank you, Mama. Thank you so much." She ran back home, spooned the mixture slowly into the baby's lips, and watched in awe as the furious cries softened into quiet whimpers, then into silence. The tiny fists unclenched, the eyes closed. Relief washed through Amaka's little body so strongly she almost cried herself. Finally, Chimamanda slept. That evening, exhausted and dizzy from hunger, Amaka whispered the name she had decided, "Chimamanda." Her mother murmured approval. "It means my God will never fail me." The name felt holy, days turned into weeks, and life hardened further. Amaka's routine no longer revolved around classrooms, pencils, or blackboards. She woke earlier than the swamp rooster, tied Chimamanda to her back using an old piece of cloth, and set off with her heavy sack. At the dump, she bent double, searching feverishly through mountains of refuse. The sun roasted her spine until her skin darkened like overburned clay. Flies clung to her face, broken glass cut her fingers, and her feet blistered from walking, barefoot over jagged stones. Other scavengers laughed as they watched her, chuckling bitterly. A baby on her back? And still scavenging? Who gave her this madness? Passers-by mocked openly. Look! A child carrying a child. She thinks she is a mother already. Amaka kept her head bowed, her jaw clenched. Their insults sliced like knives, but she had learned something more painful already. Mockery did not kill you, hunger did. She needed to feed her mother and Chimamanda. Words could not feed anyone, so she pressed on. At the buyer's depot, she sold her scraps for coins that jingled too lightly in her palm. Sometimes she had enough to buy a little powdered milk, sometimes only gari. On the worst days, she dissolved the gari in dirty river water and prayed desperately as she fed thin sips to the baby. And still, Chimamanda's survival mattered more to her than her own survival. At night, she rocked the baby into sleep with one arm, while her other hand massaged Mama Amaka's swollen leg. Mama Amaka would groan, smile faintly, and whisper, "Amaka, you are only 12, yet you carry the burdens of a grown woman. I am proud of you." Those words were her fuel. They burned brighter than food. But the swamp had not finished testing her. Gossip thickened like smoke. Some neighbors outright accused her of stealing the infant. "She must have kidnapped that baby," one woman whispered with venom. "Look at the necklace on that child's neck. Do you think children of the poor wear gold? Ha! Just wait until police come for her." Amaka wanted to defend herself, to scream the truth that she had found the baby abandoned among the flies. But she learned quickly that people believe only what fits their version of the world. So she kept silent, fighting each day not against their tongues, but against destitution itself. One afternoon, when her hunger clawed her stomach like knives, she sat by the roadside begging as cars whizzed past in specks of glitter and dust. "Please, help me. My baby is hungry," she called out in a thin, desperate voice. Some drivers shut windows. Others laughed. One wealthy woman actually rolled down her tinted glass and snapped, "Little girl, don't you know you are destroying your own life? Where is the father of that baby?" Then the car vanished in a puff of exhaust, leaving only humiliation in its wake. It was an old man who finally slowed. He studied her silently, then pressed a few naira notes into her palm. "Child," he whispered, "your suffering is too much for one so young. But remember, God sees you. Don't give up." Tears streamed down Amaka's face as she hugged Chimamanda closer. "Thank you, sir. Thank you," she whispered. That night, she bought milk and watched Chimamanda gulp it down with greedy relief. The baby slept soundly, her small chest rising and falling like fragile hope. Exhausted, Amaka lay beside her mother on the thin mat. She whispered a prayer into the mosquito-buzzing darkness. "God, I don't ask for riches. I don't ask for myself. I only ask, please, help me keep this child alive." And far across the city, in a mansion glittering with chandeliers but drowning in grief, a billionaire wiped his tears while thinking his daughter was lost forever. He didn't know that very daughter's faint cry was rising from the swamp each night, kept alive only by the stubborn love of a ragged 12-year-old girl. The mansion of Chief Anduka was as grand as a royal palace, a place where marble floors glistened like ice, chandeliers spilled light like waterfalls of stars, and fountains sang endlessly in the courtyards. The gate alone looked like the wall of a fortress, painted in shimmering black, guarded by men whose faces never forgot to scowl. It was the kind of home people whispered about, the kind of wealth that made a city bow. From the outside, it was a paradise. But inside, The heart of that palace was hollow. For all his riches, Chief Anduka was a man fractured by grief. He could walk his corridors lined with golden drapes, but every echo of his footsteps reminded him of an absence he could not repair. The most sacred room in all that mansion was not his office of polished wood or the banquet hall shining with chandeliers. It was a simpler, humbler place, the dressing room that had once belonged to his wife, Lady Chica. Lady Chica had been the jewel of his life. No written word could capture her laughter, bright like bells in the morning, or the softness in her eyes that could slice through his storms of stress like dawn-cutting shadows. When he married her, he was already a powerful man, but beside her he felt richer than any account statement. On their wedding day, as he slipped the ring into her finger, he had whispered into her ear, "Even if the whole world turns against me, you alone will be enough." For years, she proved those words true. Graceful, kind, and strong, she was not merely a wife, she was a partner. And when she told him she was carrying their first child, Chief Anduka thought his life had climbed its highest peak. Her rounded belly was his pride, the promise of continuation not only of his blood, but of their love. He dreamed of rocking that child together, of passing on to her both his empire and her mother's warmth. But fate stole cruelly. Lady Chica's body weakened in childbirth. Hours turned to panic, minutes turned to horror. He remembered clutching, her hand in the hospital, sweat clinging to her temples, her breathing ragged. Still, she smiled through pain. "Duca," she whispered, "promise me something. Promise you will take care of our baby. Promise me you will raise her with love, even if I—" No. He had cut her off, his heart cracking. "Don't say such things. You'll live. You'll see her. You'll both—" But then her breath faltered, her hand slackened, and with one final gasp, Lady Chica left the living, leaving Chief Anduka's soul shattered in her wake. He screamed her name until the halls trembled. His wealth could not bribe death. His status could not command heaven. Every jewel, every dollar in his account was powerless in the face of that silence. Yet she left behind one last piece of herself, their newborn daughter. The baby was tiny, fragile face echoing Lady Chica's beauty, her fingers curling weakly as though grasping for the mother she'd never meet. Chief Anduka cradled her, his tears falling onto her face like raindrops. "You are my treasure now," he vowed in the hoarse wreck of his voice. "You cost me your mother, but you are now my whole life, my little princess, my everything." And curled beneath the child's chin was a necklace, a golden heirloom from Lady Chica's bloodline. Her last plea had been that this necklace never leave the child's neck. Chief Anduka swore on her grave that he would obey. That delicate chain was no longer just jewelry. It was their bond, mother to child, life connecting the dead and the living, an anchor of memory and love. If life had ended there, he might have found fragile joy again. But greed watches through cracks. Chief Anduka's enormous fortune was a magnet for poison. His relatives, uncles, cousins, distant kin, swollen with envy, were like wolves circling a wounded lion. While Lady Chica lived, they had hidden their malice, bowing respectfully in her presence. But the moment her coffin descended into the earth, their whispers began. The baby represented blockage to their ambitions. One day, everything would belong to the girl, the contracts, the estates, the companies, the power, and they would have nothing but scraps from her infant fingers. So they conspired. One of the loudest voices belonged to Usuzo, a cousin whose eyes burned with greed. At a secret gathering deep in the estate's shadows, he pounded the table until bottles shook. "The man is blinded by grief. Does he not see? As long as that child lives, we will never taste his wealth. We must act, and we must act quickly." Others nodded, faces tense with hunger for riches. The child was too young to fight for herself. But if she vanished, the empire would soon collapse. Chief Anduka in his grief would crumble, and they would swoop in like vultures. Their wicked plan found its weapon in Dyke, a household servant with loyalties worn thin by promises of gold. Usuzo whispered poisoned words into his ears. "Take her. Make her disappear. Leave her anywhere she will not survive. Do this, and we will reward you with wealth beyond your wildest dreams. Refuse, and we will make you regret." Dyke hesitated. He was not a monster, but greed gnawed his conscience until it cracked. That night, as the mansion slept in solitary darkness, he crept into the nursery. The child stirred softly in her crib, her tiny fingers stretching into the lonely air as if calling for the mother she'd never touch. Dyke's hands trembled as he lifted her, feeling warmth, innocence, and the flicker of life too pure for such betrayal. Still, he wrapped her in a torn blanket, shutting his ears to his own guilt. He carried her through silken hallways, over marble steps, out into the muggy hush of the city. Quiet neighborhoods gave way to dirtier streets, darker corners, roads, with fading streetlights and puddles that smelled of sewage. At last, at the far edge of the city where only those who had lost everything dared to live, Dyke stopped at the dump site. Flies buzzed furiously, rats darted. The stench was unbearable, but his heart was colder. Laying the bundle down amid heaps of rotting trash, he muttered a half-hearted prayer under his breath, as though God could be bribed into silence the way men could. The baby whimpered, her tiny voice slicing the air, but he turned away quickly, footsteps vanishing into darkness, leaving behind only the delicate shimmer of a forgotten golden necklace, glistening stubbornly in the thin moonlight. By dawn, the mansion roared like thunder. Chief Anduka, waking to an empty crib, collapsed on his knees. He screamed until his voice broke, demanding answers no one could give. "Where is my daughter? Where is my princess?" Panic spread, but servants in guilt and terror kept silent. The truth thickened like smoke, but no air escaped to free him. Finally, broken, Anduka retreated into the prison of grief. He locked himself away and withered, refusing food, refusing counsel. "Chica," he wept, gripping the crib where his daughter had been. "They have taken you from me, and now her too. Must I lose everything?" The mansion's gold shimmered aimlessly, as though mocking its once proud owner. From the outside world, he still looked like the billionaire who had it all. But everyone close enough to feel his silence knew the truth. Chief Anduka's crown was shattered, not by bankruptcy, but by heartbreak. And yet, fate was not finished. For elsewhere, hidden in the swamp's filth, the very child he mourned was not dead. She had been scooped into the arms of a 12-year-old scavenger whose love was stronger than her hunger. As Chief Anduka buried himself in grief, Amaka rocked the baby to sleep under leaking zinc roofs, whispering promises that destiny itself had written. "I will not abandon you. You will not die, not while I have breath." Two hearts, worlds apart. One drowned in riches but empty. The other drowned in poverty but overflowing with love. Both were tied together by a golden necklace waiting to bridge the abyss. The sun in Lagos that day was merciless, a white-hot beast crouching above. The city, pressing its heat onto every surface until even the tar on the road seemed to sigh and shimmer. Cars sped by like arrows, honking furiously, their engines coughing smoke into the sky. On the sidewalks, beggars clustered in patches, stretching weary hands toward indifferent drivers. Heat flies buzzed in their ears, dust clung to their skin. Insults lashed them as brutally as hunger ever had. Among them stood Amaka. Barefoot on the wide road's edge, her face streaked with sweat, 12 years old yet carrying burdens meant for 30. The faded wrapper strapped tightly across her small back held Chimamanda, already dozing, though every now and then a pitiful whimper escaped her tiny lips. Amaka's sack of scraps lay at her feet, half full, too light to bring enough money for milk. Her mother's warning still echoed in her ears. Amaka, you are a child. They will insult you if you beg there. Please don't go. But Chimamanda's soft sobs earlier had torn through her heart like spears. Her mother's words, wise as they were, had to be ignored. Mama, I can't let her starve. I'd rather endure insult than watch her die, Amaka had whispered, pressing her lips against the baby's wisps of hair. So here she was, at the city gates, facing cars that sped past with windows rolled up against the sight of desperation. Her tiny hand stretched out again and again, trembling not from shame, but from hunger. Please, she murmured in a cracked, hoarse voice to any who glanced her way. My baby is hungry. Help us. Most people did not even turn their heads. Some tossed coins onto the dirt in a cruel mockery of charity, never meeting her gaze. Others laughed outright. Ha! Look at her, one man sneered from his car, his laughter spilling out through the half-open window. A child carrying another child. Lagos is finished. His passenger chuckled, adding, She thinks she's a mother already. What nonsense. The car zoomed away, each word carved pain into Amaka's chest. She wanted to scream, to tell them she never chose this fate, that she was only 12, that Chimamanda wasn't her baby but one she had saved from the jaws of death. But she stayed quiet because explanations did not put food in a child's belly. Her lips pressed together in weary resolve, she rocked her body slightly so Chimamanda would not feel the stillness of despair. Don't cry, Mandy, she whispered, against the baby's ear. I'll find you milk today. I promise. You will not go hungry tonight. The heat was a living weight on her already thin shoulders. Sweat rolled down her spine, soaking the neckline of her threadbare dress. The baby stirred, whimpered, and Amaka shushed her gently, her voice cracking with exhaustion but filled with stubborn tenderness. Then, suddenly, the atmosphere changed. From the distance came the blaring of shrill sirens. Horns cleared traffic with impatient authority. A black convoy of SUVs rolled toward the gates, sleek monsters gliding in perfect formation. Each car's glass was tinted, their engines growling low like caged predators. Drivers and beggars alike scrambled from the road, murmuring and pointing. It's the chief's convoy, someone gasped, pressing back against the gate. Which chief? Another whispered. Chief Anduka, the billionaire. The mere mention of his name sent waves across the crowd. The poor knew his mansion the way children know fairy tales, out of reach but magnificent. His wealth was legend, his sorrow too. Even in slums whispers had traveled, the man who had lost his wife and his little child. Amaka did not scatter with the others. She was too desperate, too drained. She clutched Chimamanda tighter, her trembling legs refusing to abandon her fragile mission. One last plea, she told herself. One last stranger. Maybe they will help. As the lead SUV approached, Chief Anduka sat inside, his head leaning against the tinted window. His face was lined with weariness, eyes shadowed from too many sleepless nights haunted by ghosts. He had not smiled in months. His daughter was gone, swallowed by fate, or so he believed. Then his tired gaze drifted outward, almost carelessly at first. He expected to see the usual throng of beggars, little more than blurs in his weary world, but his gaze snagged on something. A thin girl in rags, a child really, but with a baby strapped across her back. Something about the sight made his chest tighten. He leaned closer to the glass, and then his heart stopped. There, around the baby's tiny neck, glinting beneath the merciless sun, was a golden necklace. Not just any necklace, the necklace. Her necklace. Lady Chica's last command. Their heirloom, the promise he had sworn to protect. His breath seized. A sound like fire roared in his ears. His body struck still as realization exploded within him. Was this possible? Could his baby still be alive? "Stop the car!" he thundered, his voice reverberating with a mix of anguish and fragile hope. The driver hesitated. "Sir, it's not safe. I said stop." The convoy screeched as brakes screamed against the hot tar. Guards leapt out swiftly, scanning, weapons at ready, causing the beggars nearby to scatter like frightened crows. Amaka stood frozen, wide-eyed, terrified as tall men in suits and sunglasses poured out like shadows from another world. She hugged Chimamanda closer instinctively, her heart battering against her ribs. Chief Anduka emerged from the SUV slowly, every step unsteady as though his legs had forgotten their duty. He had faced boardrooms filled with predators, senators filled with malice, and rivals with sharpened knives, but nothing had ever shaken him as much as this sight. His lips trembled, his eyes locked only on the baby. He stopped in front of Amaka. His voice broke. Where did you get this child?" Amaka's tears blurred her vision. Her head shook wildly, as if against some invisible force. "No, sir, please. She's mine now. Don't take her. Please don't. I found her. She would have died. Don't." Chief Anduka gasped as though stabbed. His trembling hands pointed, wildly, almost desperately, at the necklace shining against the baby's fragile chest. "No, she is my daughter. This necklace belongs to my wife. My wife. She made me promise never to take it off. This is my child, my princess, my blood!" The world seemed to freeze. The guards, the beggars, the rushing traffic, all fell into muted whispers. Gasps flew like sparks in the silence. Amaka's body shook. She looked down at Chimamanda, who stirred slightly, letting out a faint cry. Those cries had once pierced the swamp. Now they were tearing open the chest of a billionaire. Her throat tightened as tears spilled freely. "No," she whispered hoarsely. "I found her in the trash. She was cold and dying. I saved her. Please don't take her away from me." Chief Anduka did something no one expected. He dropped, to his knees, right there on the boiling tar of the road. His suit gathered dust, his flesh burned from the heat of the asphalt, but he did not care. He sobbed openly, shaking as he reached toward the baby. "My child, my angel, my princess. God, you've brought her back to me." His fingers brushed the chain, confirming reality as though touching proof could erase all his torment. Then, looking up through tears at Amaka's trembling face, his voice cracked again. "What is your name, child?" Her lips fluttered. Amaka." He repeated it reverently, memorizing the syllables. "Amaka. You saved my daughter. You saved my life." He inhaled shakily, his vision blurry with the flood of his gratitude. "How can I repay you?" Desperation swallowed Amaka's words. She pressed her palms together, bowing her head. "Please, sir, just help my mother. She's sick. That's all I want." The crowd gasped again. A child who had carried the chance to demand riches, houses, cars, yet all she asked for was healing for her mother. Chief Anduka's tears came harder. He placed a trembling hand against his heart. "Your mother will not suffer another day. I swear it, on my wife's grave. You and your mother will live under my protection." Chimamanda stirred in Amaka's arms, crying again. Chief Anduka rose shakily, lifting her with reverence as though touching holy relics. He held her against his chest, kissing her small forehead, his tears dripping into her soft hair. The golden necklace glistened brighter in the sun, a silent, witness to the miracle that had just rewritten fate itself. For in that moment, on a roadside scorching with heat, two worlds collided. Poverty met wealth, hunger met abundance, despair met hope. The swamp child and the grieving billionaire were no longer strangers, but family woven together by love, loss, and the beating heart of a rescued infant. And though the crowd marveled in whispers, only God and destiny knew this was merely the beginning. The road outside the city gates still buzzed like a disturbed hive long after Chief Anduka lifted his daughter, his long-lost treasure, into his arms. The crowd watched in stunned silence, as the billionaire, a man too wealthy to kneel before governors, had dropped to his knees in gratitude before a dust-stained child. It was a moment so powerful it felt scripted by heaven itself. But for Amaka, reality pressed in quickly. Her heart beat rapidly, not with triumph, but with fear. As Chief Anduka's tears fell onto Chimamanda's head, Amaka's trembling voice broke through the murmurs of the crowd. "Sir, I cannot go with you. My mother, she is waiting back home. She's very sick. Please, I can't leave her." The chief froze, stunned by her words. In all his life, no one had spoken to him like that, choosing a frail woman in a swamp over the gilded embrace of wealth. But instead of anger, admiration swelled in his chest. This wasn't a child of selfish ambition. This was a soul carved by loyalty and a love money couldn't buy. He nodded slowly, clutching Chimamanda closer. "Then take me to her," he said, through raw emotion. His voice, weakened yet firm, silenced even his guards. "If your mother lives, then she lives with my gratitude. Lead the way, Amaka." The convoy that had minutes ago commanded trembling reverence now prowled down the swamp's dirt roads, shocking those who peered from ramshackle doors and leaky windows. Children ran barefoot after the SUVs, screaming with excitement. Gossip spread like wildfire in the humid air. "Chief Anduka, here in our swamp? No, it cannot be." "But why? With Amaka riding with him? What's happening? Maybe she is being arrested." "No, haven't you heard? They say she saved his daughter." "Ha! Impossible. Who would believe such a thing?" The swamp that had always been invisible, buried under the neglect of the wider city, was suddenly the center of attention. And leading that procession was Amaka herself, squeezed nervously into the back seat of the SUV, her body still stiff from the dirt road outside. Chimamanda was asleep in Chief Anduka's arms, tiny fingers curled into the billionaire's expensive suit, as if destiny mocked the contrast between golden silk and swamp-stained cloth. When the convoy finally stopped before Amaka's shack, the neighborhood children shouted louder, their voices high and breathless. "They've come here! The chief has come to Amaka's house!" The guards leapt out first, scanning the fragile structures with visible discomfort. The swamp pressed, its odor sharper here, damp mud, stagnant water, mosquito-ridden air. But Chief Anduka didn't flinch. Clutching his daughter, he ducked under the low doorway of the shack and entered. Inside, a feeble cough greeted him immediately. Mama Amaka lay on a thin mat, legs swollen, her lips pale. She stared in confusion as strangers filled her doorstep, her weak eyes clinging to her daughter first, then widening when she recognized the powerful figure cradling the child. Her trembling voice came like a gasp. "Jesus, Chief Anduka?" The man who commanded entire industries and silenced board meetings with a glance fell to his knees beside her mat. He laid Chimamanda carefully down next to her, then bowed his head. "Madam, your daughter saved my child. She gave me back my life. I owe you a debt I can never repay." Mama Amaka burst into tears. The words were unreal, unimaginable. Struggling to sit, she groaned as pain shot up her infected leg. "We only did what was right," she sobbed. "We couldn't leave a baby in the trash to die. No matter what we lack, life is still precious. Chief Anduka's eyes misted again, his throat tightening. He reached out and gently touched her leg. Even through the bandages, he could feel the heat of spreading infection. His wealthy fingers, which signed contracts worth millions, trembled against poverty's cruel mark. "You have suffered too long," he whispered, "but not anymore. You will not spend another night in pain. From today you will walk again. I will see to it with every power I have." Amaka stood in the corner, her tears flowing until they soaked the front of her dress. She clutched her hands tightly, hardly believing what her ears and eyes were telling her. For years, she had prayed, fought, begged, suffered. For months, she had scavenged trash with her bare hands just to keep her mother alive another day. And now, this man of impossible wealth knelt in their shack and promised salvation. By nightfall, Mama Amaka was lying on a crisp hospital bed, the first soft mattress she had touched in years. Bright white sheets surrounded her weary body as nurses moved with efficiency and speed. Machines beeped gently, fluids dripped into her veins, and her swollen leg was examined by doctors who spoke with authority, promising surgery, promising healing. For Amaka and her mother, it was a rebirth. They stared at the fluorescent lights above, breathing in the sharp smell of antiseptic, marveling at cleanliness replacing decay. Amaka whispered over and over again, "Mama, you will walk." Again, "I know it, God has remembered us." And in one corner of that same room, Chief Anduka sat silently with Chimamanda sleeping in his arms, watching this family as though he too had been rescued from drowning. His mind replayed Amaka's plea, "Help my mother. That's all I want." He tightened his grip on his daughter, astonished at the kind of character heaven had hidden in this ragged little girl. In the days that followed, the story spread far and wide. Newspapers shouted headlines, "Billionaire's lost daughter found alive, rescued by slum girl." Radio hosts retold the tale as inspiration for struggling listeners. Markets buzzed. Churches blessed Amaka's name during sermons. What had been gossip at the swamp now became testimony across the country. But for Amaka, it was not the fame that mattered. It was the sight of her mother sitting up in bed one morning with a smile, relief in her eyes. The infection, doctors explained, had been stopped. She would recover, and in time, she would walk. Amaka hugged her tightly, sobbing into her chest. For the first time in years, her tears were of joy. When Mama Amaka finally stood again using a walker, the chief was there to applaud. "Your daughter carried a weight far too heavy for her shoulders," he said softly, looking at Amaka. "But she never let it break her. From today, she will not carry these burdens alone." Weeks later, they did not return to the swamp. Chief Anduka's convoy brought them instead to a modest but beautiful cream-painted house in a quiet neighborhood. There was a strong roof that did not leak, clean water that gushed from taps, windows fitted with glass instead of torn tarpaulin bags. Amaka ran from room to room, shrieking laughter like a bell for the first time in her life. "Mama, look! A real house! Look, we have beds! Mama, it's all real!" Mama Amaka followed slowly, her hand brushing the smooth walls as though afraid they might vanish. She wept softly. "I never thought I would live to see a roof over our heads that was not shame. God has lifted us." Chief Anduka watched silently, his arms holding Chimamanda, and in his heart a vow cemented like stone. This girl, Amaka, had become part of his family, not just because she had saved his daughter, but because she embodied the nobility money could never buy. For Amaka, every dawn in that house was a new miracle. She returned to school, this time not in torn uniform, but in polished shoes and crisp fabric. She bent over books at night by lamplight, her eyes bright with determination. She was not just learning for herself anymore. She was carrying two mothers' dreams, the one who gave her life and the one she had saved. No one could foresee the storms still waiting in the shadows, greedy relatives seething, plotting in silence. But for now, Amaka allowed herself to breathe freely, her heart lighter than it had ever been. For once, the child who had picked trash out of the dumps now felt that she had picked destiny instead. The days in the new house flowed like a dream Amaka never dared dream before. For the first time, rain tapping against the window did not flood her bed or soak her clothes. For the first time, the scent of food was not a rare festival, but a daily rhythm in the kitchen. Every corner of the house announced safety, cleanliness, dignity. Amaka couldn't stop exploring. She opened cupboards and drawers like a pirate discovering endless treasure. Her mother laughed often now, her face slowly restoring color as her body strengthened. "Amaka," she teased one morning, resting in her armchair, "you look like someone released from prison. You have not sat still in weeks." "Mama," Amaka replied with a grin, "that is because I cannot believe these walls are ours. Every corner feels like a miracle. I keep expecting to wake up back in the swamp house, on our wet mat. But no, I open my eyes, and it is still here." When she returned to school in her new uniform, heads turned the moment she entered the classroom. Whispers trailed after her like shadows. "Is that Amaka? The swamp girl? They say she saved a billionaire's child." No, impossible. Stories are exaggerated, but Amaka, head held high, ignored them. She had carried trash sacks heavier than their opinions. Compared to hunger and pain, whispers were nothing. She sat tall at her desk, her pencil steady in hand, her heart pounding not with shame, but with determination. Her dream of becoming a lawyer was alive again, and this time it felt within reach. At night, she bent over her books by lamplight, the soft breathing of Chimamanda sleeping beside her like gentle music. Her mother often sat nearby, watching her, study with pride shimmering in her eyes. "God, let this lamp never go out," Mama Amaka prayed quietly. But beyond their walls, the story of Amaka's courage blazed brighter by the day. Nigeria could not stop speaking of the girl who, in ragged clothes, had nurtured a billionaire's lost heir. Radio stations called her a miracle. Newspapers hailed her as the trash picker who found destiny. Even pastors sprinkled her name in sermons. Faith like Amaka's, faith born in struggle, is proof God lifts the lowly. Chief Anduka listened to all of it silently, his daughter in one arm, often glancing at Amaka studying in a corner. Whenever he looked at her, he felt both pride and humility. Out of all people, God had chosen a poor swamp child to safeguard his treasure. The irony humbled him. The blessing uplifted him. He knew her courage deserved more than silent gratitude. So he planned. Weeks later, Amaka and Mama Amaka found themselves seated inside the city's largest event hall, a palace of chandeliers, gold-framed drapes, and polished marble stretching as far as eyes could see. The hall was already overflowing with guests, politicians in immaculate agbadas, women in gowns heavy with sequins, journalists with flashing cameras, and ordinary citizens who had begged at the doors just to glimpse the girl who changed everything. At the front sat Chief Anduka in a navy blue agbada embroidered with gold. Chimamanda bounced in his arms, tiny fingers clutching the necklace that had returned her to him. Beside him sat Amaka, awkward in a pretty dress he had bought for her. She wasn't used to silks and ribbons. She fiddled nervously with the hem like it was still one of the swamp's wrappers. Her mother sat proudly on her other side, dressed simply but with dignity restored. When the music faded and the hall quieted, Chief Anduka rose, commanding the room without effort. His deep voice carried across the marble like the strike of a bell. "My people," he began, "you know me as a man with wealth, with companies, with land. Some call me billionaire, some call me tycoon. But all that matters not when your heart has been broken. You also know that I lost my wife, Lady Chica, in childbirth. And you heard that my daughter was stolen from me. For months, I woke into emptiness. My wealth could not bring them back. I thought I had nothing left to live for. His voice trembled, but remained steady. But God is not mocked by greed, nor abandoned by fate. My daughter was not lost. She was saved, and not saved by the rich, not by the powerful. She was saved by a 12-year-old girl from the swamp, a child with nothing, a child who could have walked away yet chose love. This child, Amaka. A gasp rolled across the crowd as all eyes turned toward her. Amaka shrank slightly in her chair, overwhelmed. Chief Anduka extended his arm, guiding her to rise. "Come, Amaka." Her legs wobbled as she stood before hundreds. She felt the weight of eyes from governors, chiefs, even cameras that would carry her image across the nation. She clutched her dress tighter, but then she remembered the dump site, the rats, the cries of Chimamanda under the pale moon. It all filled her with courage. Chief Anduka's voice resonated like thunder. "This girl saved my daughter and asked me for nothing. She did not ask for cars. She did not ask for mansions. She asked only for her sick mother to be healed. That is the kind of heart money cannot buy. That is the kind of heart Nigeria must celebrate." The hall erupted in applause, but he raised his hand for silence. "From this day, Amaka is no longer swamp child. She is my daughter. She is family. She will live under my roof, go to the best schools, and become the woman God destined her to be. And in her honor, I establish the Amaka Foundation for Streetwa. Children, so no child will ever suffer as she did." The words sent shockwaves through the hall. People stood to their feet, clapping, some weeping openly. Flashbulbs popped from cameras. Mama Amaka pressed her hand to her chest, tears cascading down her cheeks at the sight of her daughter being exalted before a nation. Amaka, trembling, took the microphone finally. Her voice was soft but steady. "I only did what was right. I could not let a baby die. I did not know she was a princess. To me, she was just a child who needed love. If God gave me this chance, then I am grateful." Silence blanketed the hall for a moment, followed by thunderous applause so loud it shook the chandeliers. That night, back in her new home, Amaka lay on her bed, Chimamanda curled warmly by her side. She did not fall asleep immediately. She lay there remembering the swamp, the leaking roof, her mother's cough, that night at the dump when Destiny cried in a baby's voice. She realized then the cry had not been merely pain. It had been a calling out of darkness into light, out of trash into destiny, and though greedy relatives still whispered in shadows, Amaka felt no fear. She knew storms might return, but she had already faced storms greater than hunger and survived with love intact. Her story had been written not in golden books or marble halls, but in the mud of the swamp, and yet it had carried her here, to dignity, family, purpose. Epilogue. The moral, even in the darkest alleyways, love can spark miracles. A Billionaire's. Treasure was not guarded by wealth or power. It was guarded by a starving child who refused to abandon compassion. Amaka had nothing, yet by choosing love when it cost her everything, she gained life, restoration, and destiny itself. True greatness is not measured in riches, but in courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to love when it hurts most.